Welcome to Faith Over Breakfast. My name's Andy Littleton from Mission Church in Tucson, Arizona, and I'm sitting with my buddy Eric Seepin from the Village Church also in Tucson,
I like that.
Arizona.
Do you call everybody your buddy?
Nope.
So I'm like your buddy.
You're one of my buddies.
That's cool.
My dog. I call my buddy.
You call your dog. I had a weird suspicion that I was not that highly ranked. I'm ranked with the dog.
I really like the dog.
Okay.
Yeah, it's very special to me.
I don't think so from the last time I talked to you about your dog.
There's two dogs.
Oh, there's two dogs.
Yeah. So we talk a little about silence today, and then we get into engaging with culture. And I think it was a good discussion. I think you'll enjoy it. So thanks for joining us.
Thank you. Well, welcome to Faith Over Breakfast. This is Eric, and I'm sitting across from Andy in the Village Sanctuary, and Andy is pastor of Mission Church, and he just canceled the trip to Phoenix, so congratulations.
Thanks. Yeah. I had a lot going on this week. I'm supposed to go to Phoenix for a meeting, and I realized, they're going to make great decisions without me up there. I don't have to go. And I can then stay here and do other things that need to be done.
And this was a decision for your other job?
No.
Or for a church job?
Church.
Yeah. Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Like Mission Church or?
The Worldwide Catholic Church.
The Worldwide Catholic Church.
I was, making, the decisions I would have made.
Yes.
If I'd been there.
Yeah. You were going to stand up to the Pope and everything.
No. No, nothing with the Pope.
Pope's a nice guy.
Yeah.
Never met him, but he seems nice.
Yeah, I have no idea.
It's good to see you. I'm glad I'm not doing the podcast all by myself today.
Yeah, same here.
I mean, on the video, I was giving instructions on how to cook my favorite cookies, and I don't even know if it managed to get onto this.
Yeah.
Thing,
so, just by way of brief introduction, we got a great comment to the live
awesome.
video.
It was hilarious. I really loved it.
And the best thing I think is that I agreed with him.
I know.
What do we do with it? So he basically was like, "This is annoying. This video is annoying." One guy eating, one guy wrapping cords, and I was like, "Yeah, actually,
it is.
It is annoying."
Well, and did you
so why are we doing that?
So we went and looked. It was a guy from NASA.
Yeah. People were infuriating people from NASA.
But we had almost 1,000 views on that video.
Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
No.
Almost 800 or
what?
some odd views of that video.
So we annoyed 800 people?
Well, it's a preview. Maybe, it'll increase our listenership.
Is that how that works?
Yeah.
I don't know anything about technology, but the preview videos I'm used to seeing are much more
professional.
Oh,
this is just live streaming of us on our website.
And people, I don't understand. Can we talk about how degenerate our world is if they like that video?
Well, they didn't like it. They just viewed it.
If they've bothered to view that video, how problematic.
Okay, so just to go, I was trying to use my Mevo camera, so we put the camera in my bedroom, and my wife and we were live broadcasting. It was her and us talking about the menu for the week, and the thing got a ton of views.
Why?
Because people think mundane, weird things like that are interesting.
Do they?
I think so. I do.
That guy was annoyed, but then I
thought, he put a post. So.
Right, I know. I'm like, but you watched it. Like, why did you even bother? Like, I don't. The fact that you watched it and cared enough to be annoyed about it is shocking to me.
Well, you know who mostly watches YouTube videos?
No.
Men between the ages of like 23 and 40.
Why?
Oh, well, that's a good question. Because women, I mean, yes, there are like women who watch, but the demographics for YouTube is skewed for men.
Yeah, I mean...
Because women, I think, have better things to do with their time, apparently.
Yeah, and there's all these weird pop-up videos for men, I'm sure, as well.
Yeah.
And so then when you and I pop up, and I'm just slobbering down a ham, egg, and cheese
I watched
burrito.
it twice, so I was at least 2 of the views on that.
Yeah. I watched a little of it, more to just be like, how ridiculous did I look slopping down my juicy burrito?
Well, here's the good thing. You weren't on this last one. So
that's
it's just
great.
me.
That is wonderful. Anyway,
so
moving on.
You wanted to talk about silence, and I was wondering what encouraged such a...
Well, because there was this event, a day of silence for pastors, that you said you were going to go to.
Yeah,
it was yesterday.
I totally bombed it. That was not yesterday, because yesterday was Monday.
Yeah, it was yesterday.
Oh, was it on Monday?
I mean, I was there. It was yesterday.
Oh, I thought it was on Saturday. Oh.
Yeah, it was yesterday.
Yeah, I had a really good day yesterday. It was
Good.
awesome. It was my day off.
Good.
But anyway, sorry I didn't go. How was it?
I mean, it doesn't matter. I wouldn't have talked to you.
I know. That's disappointing.
Yeah.
That's why I didn't go. You would.
That's why.
You're going to be silent. Well, explain to me like what you learned and what the experience was like.
I didn't learn anything.
Really?
Yeah, it was just being silent.
People didn't say anything or lead you in anything?
There was some of that. I could have, yeah. So, yeah, it's interesting because I think everybody had different reactions. So this is a group of pastors.
How many went? Do you?
See, I don't do number. I didn't count them.
Well, I just like to feel like there are 5 of you, or is there a
maybe
bigger...
15?
Okay,
yeah, maybe
just
15.
for the feel of things.
10 to 15.
10 to 15 people.
Yeah, I'll see. I should have a better grasp how many people are at our church. Between 50 and 150, somewhere in there, or 10 to 15. I don't know. I don't count things. But I mean, there were different like contemplations that were kind of historic types that were offered that you could do, and then times of silence, and then times of prayer. But you didn't talk about what you were going to pray about. You just prayed.
So you did speak
a couple times.
Okay.
And then broke silence for dinner, and then went back into silence. But I actually had to leave, so I didn't stay for the last portion of silence. And some people were saying it was very difficult for them. There was some comment about, all the extroverts are going to like explode after this. But, something about my story, and I don't know, probably like having a very quiet father, and I'm fine with it. Like it doesn't.
Sure.
And I also didn't feel the need to explode with words. I can talk. I can hold my own in a
conversation.
In a good conversation, yeah.
So,
but it doesn't bother me to not do that.
Do you feel like Jesus spoke to you in the silence?
I didn't. There wasn't anything where I was like, "Whoa, I heard a specific thing." I mean, I think I feel like when I went and did my Oregon trip, which was a couple weeks alone.
Sure.
It felt like I needed almost an off-ramp into kind of time alone, solitude. Like I couldn't just flip a switch, and so I felt like the first part of the day was, my mind was wandering more. I mean, my mind always wanders, but it wandered more, and so I was just kind of found myself just offering to God all the different things that were coming into my mind. And then the last part of the day, there was one of the exercises was to read about Jesus and the disciples on the road to Emmaus, and to imagine yourself in that story, and to kind of focus in on a couple of words. And so there was a walk you could do, and I figured they walked 7 miles. I think if I do this walk 3 times, that'll be about 7 miles. So I did that. And the words from the story that was...
You walked 7 miles?
I think so. I'd walked the circle 3 other times during the day. So I don't.
That's a lot of walking.
I didn't clock it.
That's a lot of walking.
Yeah, and I might be totally wrong on the distance because I'm bad with numbers. I don't even know how many people were there. But I like to walk.
Unless you were walk running, you're talking about 20-minute miles. So 20 times 7, it's about 2 hours.
Yeah, maybe. I probably.
That's a lot of steps.
Yeah.
You said you're
I don't know if I walked 2 hours in that exact moment or
you know you know me. I like details.
It's painful.
I thought I didn't like details.
You love
but
details.
I love details.
Yeah.
I just don't like details of details.
So do you want to know about what I was doing during the? All you want to know about is that it was a 20-minute mile. You don't want to know any more.
Well, no, I want to know what you yeah. Well, I want to know if I don't want to know if your feet hurt while you were walking, but
slightly,
yeah.
a little bit. Let me
well, I was
that.
curious, even going back further, was you said you were emptying your mind out, or not empty, but you were kind of giving God the different wanderings that you were having in your mind. Did you feel like God took them from you and began to clear things out?
Yeah, I did. Yeah, I do think so, because there was a certain calming of heart that occurred during that, and then and during that walk, like the words from the road to Emmaus were, we had hoped he was to be the savior of Israel, and I was kind of going, okay, if I were, what did I hope Jesus was going to be the savior of, to which I'm a little disappointed. So that's kind of what
well, that seems like a big thing.
Yeah, so I mulled that over for 3 rounds of however long, whatever distance.
Whatever distance that was.
Yeah.
Huh. So God did speak something profound to you.
Yeah, I mean, it was, I guess what I'm saying is I definitely feel like I was engaging with God. It just wasn't, it wasn't like there was this clarity of an exact thought. But I think that it was, that was a thing I needed to think about. Yeah.
Did you come up with any kind of thoughts about things that you were thinking, I wished you were the savior of this and he's not, or?
Yeah, or I wished you were going to save in this way.
Right.
So and I think like those disciples who they thought he was going to be the savior of Israel, and he was. It just wasn't in the way.
Right, that they wished.
They wished, right? And that was sort of what I kept coming to was, I'd hoped for, because I have this, like, kind of my big moment of coming to faith had to do with the time where I was very depressed because a girl that I liked just wouldn't like me, it seemed, and I was very down to the point of wanting to die. And I'd been in church my whole life, and I was at this big church conference that I didn't really connect with, and I'm just dealing with all that. And then a guy gets up and just shares the very simple story of his life and the very simple gospel that I'd heard 1,000 times. And I realized maybe that's what I need, even though I'd heard it so many times. And so I reflected back on that, and I thought, but I still thought that somehow through that, like the companionship desires and the deep being known desires that I had, I kind of hoped that would come through, this freedom, this change, and in many ways, I still feel misunderstood and not known, and as I did back then. But then I was just milling that over, and I was like, I kind of hoped that would be a byproduct of this, that I would come to faith, and then some of these details would iron out.
Right. And,
just kind of milling that over and going, but I still feel some of those things. But then going, sensing, thinking, working through, like, Jesus really, hasn't let me down in these areas. I was just hoping for people to come through, right? I was hoping that Eric wouldn't get so hung up on how long
how many miles
the walk
you
was.
walked. Yeah.
No.
No,
but stuff, and that was,
well, it's
was helpful.
Yeah, the idolatry that we place on people, and wanting and the expectation for them to feel things.
And I like to think that I don't have those expectations for people, and I kind of don't tend to express that I do, but I do.
Yes.
Everything in me would really like for, to have those deep and meaningful relationships where people understood me or cared to, or, or saw deeper into my soul than I can, or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think I've been walking with God, being with God for so long, and I have to laugh that, and I feel like, man, I'm saying the same things over and over to people about the things that they believe about God that aren't true, and things that they believe about themselves and others that aren't true. And then I realized I spend most of my time like reacting to people because I believe a lot of things that aren't true about God, have a lot of expectations on people to come through and to make things work for me. And it's crazy. It's so easy to slip in and out of those. It seems like silence helps disrupt a little bit of that.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, I was great. I was looking forward to the day. I almost didn't do it. There was it's kind of a crazy weekend last week, and, that took a toll on my wife and I, and there's a big part of me that was like, I shouldn't go. And I asked her, and she thought it would still be good, but I was like, are you sure about that? And, but I am glad I did it. Need more of that.
Yeah. Well, it's just it's good to have some time away, even if it's not a completely silent retreat. It's retreating is
still a retreat.
Yeah, I mean, there's that great scene with Jesus when people are chasing him around, and he can tell his disciples are tired, and so they get on the boat so they can go off and rest.
Right.
Of course, maybe the boat ride was the rest because they get tracked down pretty quick.
You're right.
But that's important.
Yeah.
I think it's really important. I think silence is a big part of that.
Yeah, I think so too. So, yeah, I put silence out there because of that experience yesterday, but also we had a church movie night and watched the movie Silence. That's a whole nother so silence has been a theme of the last week for me.
That's funny because I think our church is going to have a movie, and it's going to be The Gods Must Be Crazy.
Oh, really? I haven't watched that for a long time. It's a great movie. So that'll be way more fun. Our movie nights,
silence one.
Our movie nights are like dark and brooding. Yeah. I mean, we've had one, but all the movies that we're talking about are like harder explorations of faith.
Yes.
Maybe we need to just have a laugh out loud movie night.
We used to have what we call the social justice movie night. And so, we kicked that off with Hotel Rwanda, and then we just started going downhill after that. Like, it was...
Downhill is in...
And they got worse and worse and more depressing and
what
gut-wrenching. And we watched about 6 or 7 before people were, we're
just done.
Well, you just get so overwhelmed by the world's brokenness and the world's, you can't do it. You feel very powerless watching those things and beginning to try to understand how you can have an impact on any of them.
Right.
It's overwhelming, I think.
Yeah.
I think it's a good reminder. I just don't know if it's a good reminder once a month for
maybe
6
a bit
months.
Much. But we should probably think about that.
But it was helpful. I think it kind of reoriented me. But yeah, movie nights.
Yeah,
they're cool.
Yeah, it was actually it was great. We watched the movie and had a fire pit afterward.
Okay.
Talked, and everybody got my version of hospitality, which included hot dogs.
Okay.
And laying bags of candy on the floor.
Nice.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
So I want to go back to something that's because I like details.
Uh-huh.
So you made a joke about your church, and you're like, oh, it's from 50 to 150 people.
Uh-huh.
But I know that you guys cook.
We do.
So how many people do you guys cook? Like when somebody cooks, What do you say? Do you say, "Hey, cook for this many people"? How do you guys work that?
Yeah, I don't know.
Have you ever cooked for your church?
Once.
Really? And that was a long time ago?
No, not that
recently?
long ago.
How many people did you cook for?
I don't remember.
That's a lot. That's hilarious. That is awesome.
My wife probably thought about it. I am all for entrusting those details to others. I really.
That is hilarious.
That is not. I don't know. It's not that I don't care. I have never been a take attendance person.
Me neither.
I would guess that we're cooking for like 100 maybe or 80 maybe.
This is interesting.
Because not everybody stays for the meal.
Okay.
But yeah, goodness, I love other people taking that. Like people who are good at details, trusting them with that is the best. Because I just am not. Yeah, I'm very bad with these things. Like, I don't get my oil changed every 3,000 miles.
Me neither. Yeah, it's just interesting. Like in our church, when it comes to that, like everybody stays for dinner,
and a lot of ours people stay.
You have to make sure that all people can eat, and we have so many people cooking.
Yeah,
that we had to come up with a system.
Yeah,
and so we all had to sit down and figure out what the system was going to look like.
And we have some kind of system.
And so that was how
Now you like to be, or do you prefer to be involved in all of those creating of systems, or are you ever just like, hey, you go create a system, I trust you?
Well, I would say that the majority of my church is not a systems church. I am probably the most systems oriented person.
Okay.
And I now have an administrator. I had one administrator named Danielle who was super system oriented, and she took a lot of things over and created a lot more systems to help relieve me of things. And now I have another administrator, and she's focused a little bit differently, but part of it is, even though our church is only 50 people with kids and everything, we run a church like it's 300, 400 people, in the ways that we organize and our volunteer systems and all those kinds of things. I would say we have, 90 to, well, I guess we did count recently because we do very interesting elder kind of overseeing things. So we have about 100 people, adults, and I'd say 80 of them to maybe 90 volunteer significantly in our community. So, and
I would, we're similar in that we have this church software that we use, and it's funny because they keep charging us more because they think we're big because of all of the people involved. And it's like, I've wanted to call them and say, hey, like, is there any way that we can have this many people involved and not, like, we're this, we're like, our average attendance is around 100. Like, that would be, you'd think we'd have 3 staff members or something. But we're including all of our, like, basically all of our people because we just want a good way to get a hold of everybody and follow up and not drop the ball. So we always have to remove people from the system and then put them back in, which is lame.
Yeah.
Just because, because most of our people are, volunteer in some way.
Yeah, and we have not gone to a system like that because none of them really work for what way we do stuff.
Yeah.
So we've had to kind of build out our own systems.
Yeah. Yeah. And that could be done. I mean, this one actually works other than that.
That's nice.
One.
Yeah, we obviously we use Constant Contact for our general email.
We use MailChimp.
You use MailChimp.
Yeah. You know why I use MailChimp?
Why?
Because the logo's cool.
It is.
That's why
cool.
I picked it.
Yeah. Well, it is kind of the millennial.
Constant
Contact is more for the businessy.
It just sounds boring.
But
MailChimp has this.
You're in constant contact.
I don't want to be in constant contact.
I do. I want to be constant in my contact.
Do you? It makes me think of the T, constant comment.
Yeah.
And that just sounds like somebody's talking your ear off.
Yeah. Well, this maybe helps us make that interesting transition into how we influence culture and how we create culture. Because what we're talking about is cultures. You have a culture at your church, and you were talking about how you introduce some of your own identity into that. Hot dogs and candy on the floor, like that.
Yeah.
The Andy.
That's how I engage with culture.
That's engage with culture. Well, and you're showing a movie, you're having a conversation about it.
Mm-hmm.
You're talking about culture. You're talking about the stories in culture. And stories are what make up culture.
Right.
Like your church has a story, our city has a story, our country has a story.
Yeah.
People have stories that they, that's a big part of culture.
Yeah.
And culture forming.
Yeah.
Kinds of things.
Yeah. So, Eric, your idea was how we engage with culture.
It was my idea.
Yeah. So that's hence why we're transitioning here. Yeah, I mean, so what were you thinking?
Well, I was thinking about, we're in the series in our church on our values because we kind of, we went
to do like once a year?
Yeah. Some years we do just one sermon that covers all 6 values, but this year we thought we have more new people and we don't do a new person class. So, I went back and counted. I spoke on community this last weekend. There are 23 sermons on community, just community itself, over the last 17 years.
Wow.
But I figured when I was looking at more of the subject matter, I think we probably have 100, 150 sermons that deal with something about living in community.
The fact that you're looking back at that and counting is crazy.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting to me how things are shaped and the way we influence them. And so I've been thinking, I was speaking on these values, I was speaking of authenticity this week, and I was thinking about, just sort of the things that are happening in our culture, like these 2 major stories of violence that happens, like, at the synagogue or in schools, and our churches, and then the presidential kind of, however you feel about Trump, the story that's coming from the White House is very loud right now, and has been since he's become a president. So there are these big defining stories where we're either against Trump or we're for Trump, and we don't know what to do about the violence, and we're either we want gun control or we want more freedom for weapons. Like, these are big stories, and I've been thinking about what does it look like to be the church? And in my sermon, I talked about God's intent for the church is that we be the proclaimers of the manifold wisdom of God, which has a lot to do with us living in freedom, and in that context of that chapter, Ephesians 3, the Jew and Gentile becoming one, all that kind of stuff. But throw your phone. So I've just been thinking about, what does it look like to authentically speak into violence, and what is it as a community? What do I have? What does our church have to say that is speaking not just to the people, but is speaking the message of freedom and the message of grace in Christ to the larger community, but also to the spiritual powers of the world. And what is God's wisdom? That part of the story, what does it have to say? To transform culture. How do we speak to all this? Because it's troubling. Shooting 8 people in a synagogue is troubling.
Yeah.
It's troubling, the violence that we are seeing and hearing and experiencing.
Yeah, and so I'm curious, how often do you directly engage with what's going on in the world and in the news in your leading and speaking here at the Village?
Well, what's fascinating to me is this place right here has become a major place for me to
be able to talk about that.
Talk about it, because I don't necessarily feel like my job.
Every church service needs to be.
I need to speak to it.
Right.
I can speak about it in the sense of the way it impacts us.
Yeah.
And I think that's part of engaging it, is talking about what the true, what we as followers of Jesus are called to live out in the midst of violence. Where Bonhoeffer says that we're sheep amongst wolves. For this time,
Jesus said that too.
Yes. But Bonhoeffer says, he talks about that idea that, we're called to be scattered at this moment.
Yeah.
And the church is our place to make a group proclamation of God's grace.
Yeah. No, that's interesting. I felt like this space and this podcast has been one where I can get into more, even like inner working of the church kind of stuff and social issues, just because it doesn't seem like that's necessarily the if you're going to come and proclaim God's word over people, that if you go too far into every because I mean, I don't know if it's just the amount of media we're consuming now, but it just seems like every week there's 10 big things. And this last week was another level, it sort of.
Yes.
But there, I mean,
sure.
But it's sad how like numb I think we're becoming, and I don't mean like I'm not. I mean I am, like I hear like, oh, there's a shooting, and that used to just impact me so deeply, and now I'm just like, another one, and I feel terrible that I'm not as like distraught, but it's just like so common. It feels that there's either violence or this group hates this group, and then every once in a while it breaks out. It's hard. So I mentioned briefly in the sermon the shooting. We were talking about motives of the heart, and so I mentioned it in that context.
Yeah.
But I mean, I think the interesting thing, and this is hard for our church, but I think something I love about our church, I want others to see, I want the broader community to see, is that we have, at least now, people on different sides of issues,
the political spectrum,
with very different life experiences. I mean, we even I was talking to one of our leaders, and one sermon didn't land with him, but then it landed with other people, and you realize even just the way that we engage spiritually, like we're not all we don't all like to be corrected, but then we don't all like to be talked gently to. Like, there's people within our church who like different types of engagement. And I love that for now, I feel that we've brought those people together around something more profound than themselves, and that there's a unity that doesn't make sense in a way that I think that the world is hoping to figure out. I mean, you hear people talking about trying to do things across the aisle, and well, how do you do that when this person really is fighting for something that you're not fighting for, and you don't have a common morality or a common vision of the world?
Right.
And I think that the things that Christianity has brought to our community allow people with very different visions of the world to lay those visions down as secondary. And I guess I see that as a way of engaging the culture. What I guess I wonder, though, is does anybody notice?
Right.
I mean, unfortunately, I feel like the faith communities that are in the spotlight a lot are ones that are doing either big things or very drastic or not drastic. Like, if a group is like just engaged on the hot button issue, get in the news or whatever.
Right.
So I just wonder if anybody sees the beauty of what happens within a lot of churches.
Yeah, and I feel like we may not know how to speak in the public space, and it probably is sort of a us learning to be more subversive and in operating not in the spotlight as bringing the gospel about. Because I was talking to a young woman at our church recently, and she had moved down from San Diego, and she said, like, everybody knows that you do not say you're a Christian at work. Like, that is not, because you will be badgered and judged. And she said, you can't be a church there and be taken seriously unless you have a huge social justice arm.
Right.
And then, so there in that culture, there's this like, it's got a very anti-Christian twist to it because what's been told and what they see is this very judgmental, trying to change policy in order to actually crush the things that you don't believe are good. And I mean and those are people that you're trying to say can't, be married, can't have free choice, can't, and it also seems that while they're saying all those things, usually Christians are also the people who are supporting people who are getting rich and, and not taking care of the poor. So that's sort of that narrative that we're kind of stuck with, not the narrative of, people who are fighting desperately to save lives through pro-life kind of movements, to people who are, on the other side, but Christians who are like, okay, well, we're not going to support pro-life, but we're people who are fighting hard and to help people in poverty, to give children a chance who wouldn't have a chance, and how these people come together and understand economics and understand, it's a miracle that they can sit together and talk and listen. And that's a big part of culture forming, is listening.
Yeah.
Like our culture does not listen to one another.
Yeah.
Like, it's ridiculous. It's just talking, but no listening.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, yeah, I've observed that. I've struggled with that.
You struggle listening? Or you struggle just...
Oh, I struggle with everything.
Right. But we wouldn't want to probe that too deeply, right?
Well, no, you do want to probe that deeply. But you've got a lot of texts coming in, so
I
you've got
have.
other things going on. I do too. That's just why I threw my phone about 10 feet away, which is a great feeling.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and so somebody brought this up at the movie night, that, we don't engage with the broader culture. And the interesting thing is I'm sitting there and I'm thinking, I was like, well, in my mind I'm going, maybe we do. I think...
Well, what would it look like to engage with the broader community? What do you think they meant?
Well, I suppose what they're getting at from the rest that was said is that we're just kind of sheltered in our Christian communities. And I have a feeling that has to do with the experiences of that person in growing up. And, I actually, my parents always worked alongside people who weren't believers. My mom actually did speak openly about her faith in the high school where she worked and was respected, even when disagreed with. I mean, I feel like in my own world, like I have circles of all kinds of non-believers, and I don't even that word sounds weird because they believe in things. I have circles of people who aren't Christians, and I really enjoy those people and like them, and I also don't hide the fact that I'm involved in ministry, which I think is an interesting paradigm for me and for them to engage with. Is like, okay, we're in this business setting, but I also
well, and historically, I don't think until 300 years after Jesus is dead, the church didn't engage in culture. It tried to survive culture.
Oh, right.
Right? I mean, Tertullian says, like, well, anytime the Nile floods, it's Christians to the lions. Like, it was a persecuted people.
Yeah, and so they never saw Constantine coming, right?
No.
They didn't see themselves, their faith ruling anything. They did, shape culture because people were changed.
Yes, and the Romans were very confused as to what to do with them.
Yeah.
And they spent a lot of their time trying to save what we now call the Bible.
Right.
Because it was getting burned all the time. There's a lot.
Yeah, and then that kind of stuff happened again in the Reformation. I mean, I doubt that some of those early reformers had any idea that their brand of Protestantism would rule entire nations. They were just trying to bring about some reforms and trying to keep the Bible alive, and individuals were changed, and then all of a sudden Protestantism blew up and people sailed to a new world, and and all forms of little Protestant churches popped up all over the place,
Right.
and we call them denominations now, and it was this dominant thing
Right.
that got corrupted.
It did.
Yep.
But Western civilization is completely shaped
Oh gosh, yeah.
by the Old and the New Testament.
Yeah. Oh yeah, because it was such, and I know you're not saying like Western civilization equals Christianity,
No.
but because Christian thought and those texts were so influential, their fingerprints are all over the place.
Right. Well,
Yeah.
I mean, and you think about all of the social movements, from hospitals to, equal rights, to all those kinds of things. It's the church. It's that is the ones who started all those things.
Yeah.
Like there was another one in our church who's going through the ASU program, social work program.
Uh-huh.
She was saying that, and she's actually in her, she may be in her late 40s, early 50s. So this is kind of like her third career.
Yeah.
And she's just having fun doing it. And she said, it's so anti-Christian. And what she found fascinating was that a lot of like the problems that are discussed are because are all traced back to sort of this Judeo-Christian ethic.
Right.
But then on the flip side, when they begin to talk about social, like
who started these movements
and who's helping at the moment. So when one example she says when the refugees had no place to be in Texas because they were like their time was up, all the churches opened up and they kept them in the state. Well, who did it? It was the churches who did it because no government was going to do it. The government wasn't going to do those things. Human beings individuals weren't going to open up their homes and say, "Oh, why don't you have a refugee? I'll have a refugee come live with me." Right. No, it's Christians opening up their larger places and allowing people to stay there. So I think like we have something to say. We have been saying something, but usually what gets talked about is like the moral law.
Yeah.
And it's not the new commandment that Jesus gave us to love one another so that people would know who he is.
Yeah, and I think we talking about details. Maybe these are the details I'm interested in, not numbers. But the the moral law isn't just a thing to be clobbering folks with, but it really is something to consider because it has all sorts of bearing on how to love one another.
Of course, thou shalt not murder is a great beginning to start with love.
Yeah, and to think of all the ways in which people are, things are stolen from them, and how covetousness really is working itself out. Is it possible that some of the people upholding the quote unquote moral law in our world today are actually, breaking that commandment?
Sure.
And so, I mean, we've been spending this year in the first 5 books of the Old Testament, and I think it illuminates the New Testament and how to love. But if you just use it as a thing of like who's in, who's out, who's right, who's wrong, you're missing the point. It condemns us all, and it points to our need for a Savior.
Right.
I think we don't read it closely enough.
I would agree.
Yeah.
I mean, you can forget all of the laws within Leviticus and Deuteronomy and all that. If you just take the 10 Commandments and you begin to process those as social justice and process those ways of loving, you would be convicted by your lack of capacity to do that.
Yep.
And then on the other hand, it's eye-opening if you actually go to the details of not just thou shalt not murder, but you begin to process what that looks like in society and how that works and how you have to practice that.
Oh yeah. Or try on the idea of do unto others as you would have them do unto you, which wasn't, by the way, Jesus didn't make that up. That idea had been around far before him.
Sure.
He was one of, you can look in almost every religion and they have a version of that that goes back to before Jesus. So why did he bring it up? Well, because good luck with that. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. You know what I want done to me? I want other people to think of me and consider me deeply at all times.
Right.
So how am I doing with that am I thinking deeply and considering no. I can't keep that for 5 seconds.
Right.
And so you're going to clobber somebody with that, or are you going to be convicted?
Right.
And see how desperately needy we all are.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So.
No. Well, like thou shalt not steal. The reality is that you and I steal daily.
Oh, yeah.
But if you begin to look at the complexity of society and the choices that we make on a day-to-day basis, we are taking things from people that we shouldn't be taking.
Every form of unfair extraction from anybody falls under that.
Yeah.
That layer of stealing. Sure. Yeah. So if you're part of a systematic theft, even if you don't know and you just don't ask the question,
right,
you don't look into it, you're stealing.
There is the sin of omission and the sin of commission. Yes.
Sure. Yeah. And omission isn't just like there's an obvious good thing you look at and go, I should give that guy $1, but I need my $1. Yeah, that is a sin of omission. You didn't do the good thing. But also everything you don't investigate, everything you don't care deeply enough to really ask the question. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, which goes back to what you're saying. Without Jesus, this is all impossible.
All impossible.
It really is. I mean, and I think that is, I mean, yes, that's the message of the church. It's been the message of the church for 2,000 years, but
I don't think people are hearing it that way, though.
No, they aren't.
And that's the bummer, is that what people, the message that people are getting is that this is a community of people who are doing very well, who think they're morally superior. And so what do they have to, and it's just annoying. Whereas if the church were saying, like, actually, like, there's no way any of us can live according to this law. That's what we've discovered. Yeah. We've discovered that the only way to move forward is with, in profound, waves of mercy,
right,
from God.
Well, and I feel like there are two choices. There are two issues that basically the church is said to face or to be judgmental on. One is that we are adamantly against gay marriage, right? And we are against abortion.
Right.
These are these two issues.
Yeah.
And we're a public institution in bed with a government because we get all these tax breaks.
Sure. Which
has become a subject over the last year or two.
Yeah.
People have been really clamoring about.
Sure.
I wonder if the way that we begin the process of saying, yeah, we have some moral things that we hold on to, like we're against, gay marriage, or we have to step out of being in bed with the church or with the state.
Sure.
I think church is going to have to stop getting its tax break.
Yeah, I expect that to come, and though of course that would be a bummer. Like, it would be a little harder, but I agree that it would probably be a purifying. It would have a purifying effect if the social benefit went away. I think it would be good.
Yeah, I think it needs to go away, because I think we need to again be an institution of Jesus, and not one of Jesus with some state benefits.
Right, because that really muddies the waters.
And I mean, I've contemplated what that might look like for our church, and I haven't felt like God has called me personally yet to say, hey, this is an issue that we as an elder board need to begin to discuss. But I suspect it's something down the road
I do too. Yeah.
that we are going to have to talk about and think through.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know. It's I feel like these things are so heavy that when we start talking about it, I'm just like, without Jesus, this is really, really depressing. And I talked in my sermon a little bit about evil, and about how, the church's proclamation of God's wisdom is not necessary to man, but to the prince and principality in the heavenly realm.
Yeah.
That we're making an announcement that the king is coming back. Here's a small taste of the kingdom. Look, we're all at the foot of the cross together.
Yeah.
That's a powerful, like we can actually love, we can practice the 10 Commandments as a response to God's love and not as a club over us. And I think that's a really powerful place to be.
Yes.
And I think it confuses darkness. It confuses the enemy, and it confounds him when we're able to do that together.
Yeah.
So I think
I agree. This has probably been a solid podcast.
I think it's probably been a solid podcast. I can always see when the Andy, like, it's the end of the podcast, Eric. Like. We're done, Eric.
Thanks for tuning in, everybody. We appreciate it. And, keep the thing that helps us grow a little is if you share our posts and give us a rating.
Yes.
So, every time you just say, hey, I like that podcast, and throw it out on your Facebook page.
Just let me quickly check before we end. Just see if anybody has emailed us at faithoverbreakfast@gmail.com.
Yep, that's where you'd email us any questions or topic ideas, or if you just want to tell us how annoying we are. You can do that on Facebook in the comments, obviously, as our buddy from NASA did.
Yes.
Or
you can comment on our video.
Or you can email us if you really care and want to have a discussion with us about it.
No new people.
No new emails. So with that, we say goodbye.
Goodbye.